But if there's anything we've learned about this industry is that everything is cyclical. Southwest was a ULCC in a sense back when it started. Then it got old. And then someone else came in and said, here, we've figured it out. And that worked until it didn't.
This is the Time on Wing podcast. Welcome back. I'm Courtney Miller with Visual Approach Analytics. With me, as always, Garrick Deschavon of Collateral Verifications. Garrick, who's the lucky victim today?
Well, our victim today is Brett Snyder.
He's
Brett quite well. He is definitely cranky. That's a question we need to ask him. How did he come up with that name? But so Brett is currently the founder and president for Cranky Flier and Cranky Concierge. He is also the author, along with you, I believe, of the Cranky Network Weekly.
I'm more the brains. He's more the brawn.
Well, we'll make sure to ask him that. Prior to that, he was analyst and blogger at BNet for, I think, CNBC. He was also director at PriceGrabber.com. He was a project manager for marketing and planning at United Airlines. He also did a stint with where he was manager in pricing and tariffs for America West Airlines. He's got a BBA in marketing and tourism from George Washington University, which is where my daughter's going to go. That's awesome. And he also has an MBA from Stanford University, Graduate School of Business. So another smart guy, another smart ass that's going to be on the on the podcast. So it should be a lot of fun. So with all this, Brett, this is your time on wing.
Just a quick intermission before we continue with the show. We do get a lot of questions about how our listeners can support the show, and frankly, the easiest way is to continue the spirit of the show, which is just to reach out to us at conferences. But we also run businesses as well, and you can support us by supporting a lot of the work that we do. You can support the work that I do through Visual Approach by visiting visualapproach.io, where we produce a lot of research and analysis, a lot of data visualizations.
From my side, obviously, I focus more on metals, so anything that's aircraft related. If you're looking for valuations, whether it's on aircraft engines, I'm happy to help with any of those types of projects. So we appreciate certainly the opportunities to work with all of you. And we certainly also appreciate just the fact that people are willing to listen to what we have to say and enjoy kind of our thoughts and takes on what we think is a fascinating industry. So thank you.
Okay, back to the show.
Well, Brett, so thanks for being on the show today. We do appreciate you taking the time to speak to at least me. I know, Courtney, you speak to him way too much, so you probably are sick of him already. But, yep. The way that we get started with all of our guests is we love to hear kind of how you got your start in aviation. Where did the passion come from so that, you do what you do today? And take us through kind of maybe the journey of how you got to where you are today. So I'll just let you go and see where it goes.
All right, come back in about 2 hours, and then we'll get there. Thank you guys for having me on, or thanks, Garrick, for having me on.
You're welcome.
So we go
how
to the
did he know how I voted? Did you tell him? I didn't.
So look, how did I get started? The year was 1977. No. Is that a little?
It could be. It could be. Yeah, that's right. I was a young lad.
I mean, that was the year I was born. And to be fair, I have absolutely no idea how I got interested in this business. I had no one in my family or anything. But when I was a little kid, I loved this stuff. I would make my family, anytime anyone was flying out of LAX, I would make them go and stop at every terminal, and I'd run out and get timetables and come bring them back. And then on the way home, I'd force them to plan trips, and they wanted to kill me. But it was great. It was to the point, my grandma, when I was a little kid, she took me to the what is now the Sheraton Gateway, Sheraton Plaza La Reina at the time, for my birthday, and we just got a room that had a view of the runways and sat there and watched airplanes, and I would keep track of the planes that landed.
Wow.
So I don't know where it came from. I have no idea. But the thing is that for me, it was never about the flying, any of that experience. I mean, who would want to be a pilot? No one here would want to do that.
I know, yeah.
It's the worst. Very long.
Worst.
Anyway, but no, I never had that part of it. Even the traveling part is not as important to me. It's the complexity, it's the network, it's the logistics of it all. It's the business that always grabbed me. Even as a kid, like I'm sitting here planning flights for family. It was really about the logistics of how do you get places and how do you do things. So I was weird. That has not
past tense. That was nice. That was cute.
I kept rolling into that has not changed. But I did things like I became a travel agent when I was 12 years old. It's ridiculous.
How do you do that, or how does a 12-year-old become a?
That's a great question.
It was 1989, right? I mean, so that was still brick and mortar, like.
Oh yeah, brick and mortar.
Being a producer, Garrick. That was quick math.
But here's the funny thing: Sabre still looks the same.
That's true, it does.
Yeah.
But no, what happened? So we actually, my mom took my brother and I. We went to get donuts, and across the street there's this travel agency, and they had a thing like painted on the window, travel school. I was like, I want to do that. And the owner is this old guy. He's long since passed away, and he kind of just looked like, are you insane? But then he gave me the OAG, like big old OAG. And he's like, well, tell me, this or that or something. And I did it. And he's like, all right.
Is this your job interview or like your entrance exam?
It's a pretty low bar. You have to pay to go to travel school. So he's like, I'll take your money, I guess. So I did that. I went through the process. It was all pretty basic kind of thing. I mean, you don't have to do that to become an agent, but I did. And then they brought me on just as an independent contractor, and I just booked like friends and family stuff. But the point is, like, I went to school. I ended up at GW in DC, and I was excited about that because US Air was based there at the time, and it was still US Air then. And I did some internships there. My parents were in Phoenix, so during the summer I came back. I started interning with America West in the sales group there. And then, so, I was priming myself to come work for an airline. Came out of college, I went back to Phoenix, and I joined America West. And people were like, are you crazy? This is some piddly airline that shouldn't even exist, and it's just coming out of bankruptcy, and why are you even bothering with this? It's like, joke's on you, I can say now, because that was the best job I'll ever have. I mean, I got to learn under, all the people that have turned into running American, and of course now, Scott Kirby at United. I mean, Scott was the head of our group. I learned so much working under him. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Doug was there. So many of these people were there. So that kind of set me off on my path. And then I was in pricing. And then I applied to go to business school at Stanford. And that was the only place I wanted to go. Because after a couple of years in the airline industry, I realized, oh man, this place needs some outside knowledge. Like, there's so many airline people that know how airlines do things, and I wanted a more general business education. I felt like I was so focused on the airline side that when I got there, I was like, oh man, I need something more general. And so Stanford was exactly what I wanted, and I didn't know if I'd get in or not, but I did, off the wait list, like 3 days before orientation began. Or actually, it was after orientation.
The walk-on.
It was. This was 2002. There was a Saudi guy and a Pakistani guy, and they couldn't get their visas.
Oh, ouch.
I know. Well, they got there the next year. So, I went to Stanford, and it was amazing. It was the highlight of my educational career for sure. I learned so much, but also just the people and the network and all just the random, like, you would get people that would come in and speak or guest lecture or teach classes. It was just like soaking it all in. It was really amazing. And while I was there, in between my first and second year, I actually went to what became EOS. You remember these guys?
Oh, yeah.
The transatlantic one. So it was just Dave Spurlock, the founder, and he was just building his business plan, trying to get funding. And so he brought me on as an intern between my first and second year, and we were just working on the business plan. And
those were 7.5s, right?
They were 7.5s, yeah.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, to do it. Obviously, it didn't work in the end, but it was so fascinating. And then I ended up after school. I thought about going there, and I decided not to. And instead, I ended up at United, deep in bankruptcy. I still remember getting a call from like the recruiter person. Or the HR person who was like, okay, so, I just want you to know, like, we just had the loan turned down from the government, but, it's going to be fine. I was like, I'm not worried about this. I was like, this actually maybe will make United actually fix things if they just don't have a pile of cash to, do their stuff. So I was pretty excited. I went in. It was a group called Marketing Planning. That was a new group. Every marketing group did its own thing at United. It was like, oh my God. I mean, at this time, TED was its own world. We had TED over
it's
there.
United without you and I.
Yes, or the ass end of United. Take your pick.
Yes, that works.
There was the remains or whatever of what might have been United Loyalty Services, and when they were going to spin it out, it wasn't even in the building. It was in a different building entirely, like a 20-minute drive away. You had the .com people doing their own thing. You had the product people, like everyone just doing whatever in these different areas. And so the idea was like they're going to have this marketing planning group to coordinate, right? The people I worked with on the team, amazing, like really good analytical minds. Like we did some really cool work, and it failed so bad. Nobody wanted to listen.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, because you would probably have to rely on these teams that were in their silos who had wanted nothing to do with you, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, they want to do their own things. I mean, like the advertising group, like they just cared about winning Emmys. I don't think they cared about supporting the airline. Like it was, this was at the time with the commercials, like the animated ones.
Remember the whale through the 777?
Dude, did it
win an Emmy? I remember it.
I don't know what won an Emmy.
I'm not any more likely to fly United Airlines, but I remember that commercial.
And you remembered it was affiliated with them, so that's actually a start. But
I thought of a bloated whale.
Maybe they should bring that back.
Bring it back.
Bring it back.
But I mean, what ended up happening? And I was a project manager. There were layers upon layers of everything here. But then they'd have a weekly meeting. And they called it Happy Plane. It was the unhappiest of meetings because it would be like 30 or 40 people in a room, not agreeing on anything, and then you just do it again, and nothing would happen.
So let me get this straight. The meeting was called Happy Plane?
Yeah.
That's like the first clue. It's like the red flag of all red flags. If you have to put happy in the meeting name, like,
yeah. I mean, there was no like real sense of humor either. It was miserable. Like I had to put out this marketing calendar every week that looked like someone just threw up on a spreadsheet. It was so tiny with the type and all this stuff, and I had to send it out to everyone. And I would send it out, and I started putting jokes in there about different
See if
things.
anybody read it.
And I got told I had to stop. This was in the email, not even in the attachment, right? Like the attachment is fully there, and they're like, "That's not appropriate. We have to, you can't make jokes."
Okay, but wait a minute. Was it because they were inappropriate jokes, or any joke was inappropriate?
No, anything. It wasn't even that. It was almost like sometimes it was commentary. Like I remember one time I just said something like, welcome back baseball, because it was time for like spring training had started, and that was my first winter in Chicago, and I was like hiding in like the fetal position because I didn't know winter until then. But but no, I mean there was stuff. It was wild. It was such a miserable time to be there. I think everyone was miserable. I mean, this is, like I said.
In fairness, that was probably year 95 of the Cubs World Series drought, so they didn't know baseball either.
They didn't know.
I mean, listen, though, anything to distract from the pain and suffering of United in 2004-05. But that kind of is an explanation of just how silly the whole thing was. And I think what happened in the end, the group, by the way, made it maybe a year before it was disbanded. You need to decide who is doing this, right? Because advertising really wanted to run the show. And I remember it was something along the lines of like, you guys will figure it out. And I was like, oh, that's the end of that. There's no.
Yeah.
So they ended up disbanding it. But I left before they disbanded it because I found a new job outside of the airlines. And that was my last airline job. United broke me.
Wow.
But
thank you, United.
Yeah, well. But what happened is then I went to a .com, PriceGrabber.com, which you may remember from back in the day. It's barely a thing now. It's technically still a website, but it was early comparison shopping. Right? And it was very successful, and it was big and growing, and they wanted to go into different verticals. And so they asked me to come and build a travel site. And I did. So it was a meta search site. And, we were very early on in the in the whole trend that it's not just about price and schedule. We actually built these little like stoplight indicators about what was on the airplane, and you could filter by them. Like you could see, on time percentage, like good, bad, whatever, for a specific flight. You can see in-flight entertainment or things like that you could actually filter on. So I feel like we were actually onto something. But then PriceGrabber got sold to Experian. The person that ended up running it afterwards, I laid it out for him. I was like, look, if we want to actually compete and do something, I need dedicated resources. I need this. It can't just be, it's another vertical along with all these other like shoes or something. And he's like, you know what? I agree, but I can't give it to you. So we're shutting it down. But I stuck around at PriceGrabber, and they had me do other things instead of laying me off. And that's when I started writing about the industry. It actually started initially, we tried to create these product forms to get people to talk about the travel. I mean, it worked in other places. Like people would come and discuss, this CD player or something back in the day. And so we tried to do it with travel too. And I was seeding the forums, and, very few people were participating because it's completely different. But I had friends that were like, man, you should start writing about this. And here I was sitting here saying, well, I don't have a site anymore once travel got shut down. I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so they actually they named it, bought the domain, and made me go with Cranky Flier. That was 2006.
So the name Cranky Flier was chosen for you?
Yeah, it came from my friends. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Chris and Heather. Heather used to call me Cranky Pants.
So that's where that came from. That's really cool.
Lovable nickname. Then I got laid off. And so that was, like a month before my wedding. It was perfect time.
Oh, nice. Wow.
In the throes of the financial doom of 2008. It all went great. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna go out on my own. And I think it was about, 4 minutes until I realized I wasn't going to make money blogging.
All four, huh?
Back in 2008. I mean, I could make some money freelancing, but I wasn't going to be able to do enough for what I wanted to make with it. And what I realized is people kept asking me on the blog, they kept asking me for information about, like, oh, can you help me with this problem or that problem or something? And I was like, well, I could probably turn that into a business, actually helping people with stuff. And so that's when Cranky Concierge was born. That was in 2009 is when that one started. And that is now turned into, full-blown travel agency. Over time, I've tried other things. And then during the pandemic, when that business completely disappeared in the most frightening way ever, because I have employees that I need to take care of, well, business goes away. No money's coming in. We're incredibly busy canceling all these flights. So everyone's working like crazy to not get any money coming in. And then we have to return the airline commissions that were already paid for all the flights that are now being refunded.
So that negative booking dynamic that you hear about that the airlines had, they literally had negative bookings. That was hitting you too. You were actually writing checks back for travel that commissions had paid, but didn't actually. They refunded the tickets. Wow.
Yeah, because airlines pay at time of ticketing. Hotels and everyone, they do it after the trip is done. But airlines pay at time of ticketing. You got to give it back if they don't use it. And yeah, I mean, we had to pay. I had it somewhere. It was 6 figures that we had to give back.
Wow.
Like right in the worst time in theory. Now our host agency was actually really great to I wouldn't call it financing it, but they let us not have to give it all back right away. They said, we can spread it out a little bit, and that was really nice. But so we did things like sold shirts, and then I was talking to this girl who we were going to do an award show. And it turns out I was catfish because it was a guy.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so we started the Cranky Network Awards and Cranky Network Weekly. And now every Friday night, get to talk to court.
It's definitely an interesting little journey that you got there, especially, I would have, as soon as you met Courtney, I think that I would expect you to say that's when I just stopped being interested in aviation. I just stopped altogether.
It was a dark time.
This is where the catfish comes in.
Yeah.
So it really was during COVID, and it was fall of 2020, right? When we started talking about schedules are coming out. Forecasts and all these projections are being made on these schedules that we were looking at. We're like, but these aren't even real schedules.
Yeah, not even close.
Not even close. And even today, the schedules that are published are not listed as accurate in the weekly. Like we now have kind of learned the patterns that the airlines kind of follow.
Yeah, like Southwest is pretty close, but we've now kind of gotten that cadence down. Frontier, we don't know what they're going to fly tomorrow.
Right.
Wow. Who knows? Who's to say? But I mean, if you remember, Court, like in those times, I mean, every week would be this massive refiling of the schedule for every airline. And it would be like, we cut 25% of the schedule this week for next month. Like, oh my God, like the whiplash was insane. But that was the key. And I think it's still one of the more popular things we do on Cranky Network Weekly, which is that page that shows like which months we consider accurate and which ones we don't. Because it really does make a difference in getting a sense of any kind of forecast. I mean, back then it was different too, because whatever guidance they gave was just sort of like a shrug. I don't know. Call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's going to change anyway.
Wasn't it more just kind of like we're going to throw this out there, and if people actually book it, then we'll fly it?
I don't even think it was that. I think it was more just like we're so busy with last minute changes and trying to figure things out that we're just putting a placeholder based on what was there before. Yeah. And we know we're not going to fly it, but whatever. And people will book it and then we'll just do it. Like if we'll consolidate flights or whatever it may be. And, domestic was easier in the sense that you didn't have to worry, like, is this country even open?
I mean, a big part of the weekly as well. So every once a week, we use Cerium data. It comes out usually on Friday evening, my time.
Most often.
Ish. Yeah. But when it comes in, then we take the whole schedule and we look at it. And then we have this weird, 2 to 3 hour call on Friday evening where we're going through all the schedule stuff for all the North American stuff. I have a dashboard I look at. Brett's on DO kind of doing his thing. Our top subscribers for the weekly are the airlines themselves, right? So all the network planning teams at all the airlines in North America. Are there any airlines that don't receive it in North America? I'm trying to think.
Probably.
I think even Silver gets it.
I don't think Eastern gets it.
Not anymore. You're right.
I don't even know.
Schedule means something different to Eastern Airlines. But then the texts start flying right to some of these airline people. These airline contacts were like, "Hey, did you really mean to do that?" Most of the time, they're like, "Oh yeah, don't look at that." Or they'll be like, don't mention that. We're like, too late.
a lot of the times we know what they're doing. A lot of times we're good at pretending we know what they're doing. But there are some times that absolutely I'll ask, like, what's this? But for the most part, I mean, I think we know. And we just, like, we run through everything. And then we circle back around and say, okay, we have to pick top 5 trends we want to go to. And admittedly, this is getting harder and harder because things have solidified far more as we've gotten further away from the pandemic. And we'll have, like 2 weeks ago, which there were things we had to cut because there was just so much we could talk about. And then last week, it was maybe a little lighter. So it comes and goes. But we always try and get 5 that we can write in more detail. And then we still kind of do the write-up of all the little things too.
Some of the more interesting kind of trends are kind of the more personality-based trends. So for instance, Spirit adding some DFW flying this week or last week, and American's response this week.
No, it was the same week.
Or was it the same week?
It was the same week. Because they filed it. I mean, they knew it was coming, so American got it in before Friday night with the response to it.
Yeah, we really start to see the personalities emerge. United's always good for something. There's always some sort of change they have going on. Southwest files their schedules, and they're largely accurate. Very little changes. Where Brett mentioned Frontier, who knows?
All the time, it will change. We try to call it accurate, and by accurate, we don't mean final. We just mean pretty close. You know who's good for nothing?
Swoop. Sunwing.
No, not Swoop. Sunwing. Most weeks, like, we're just going to refile our whole schedule. I mean, it's got to be WestJet people now.
Every other week, because
every other week
they have to have a week to pull out their entire schedule to refile it the next week. Yeah,
but they're so overactive, and I don't understand why. It's crazy because WestJet's not like that. You'd think it'd be coming from the same place right now, but no, it's not.
Somebody might be a little worried about their job.
Maybe it's that.
Do you know how many times I have to file the schedule? These changes. I have to make all these changes. That's what I would be doing. So let's talk.
All right, so I have to ask. Hold on.
Yes.
So what drove you to do Cranky Network Week? Because when did you guys officially meet? It was in 2020, or was it before that? That was way before that. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you how. We did a podcast. It was called, and it is a podcast that continues to this day. A shout out to the Airplane Geeks podcast. Like, they're literally still recording today. That's when we first kind of spoke. And that was in 2007.
Okay.
And that podcast is still going.
Yeah.
It's a great great podcast. Those guys are great.
We're just both idiots and kind of goofed around and figured it'd fit pretty well for us to do it together.
Yeah. So I'll explain it this way. You know that one friend that everybody has that just kind of goes too deep into the weeds on shit that doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately I do.
That person.
Yeah.
Right. So we were the only two responding to each other. And by the way, Garrick, you and I are like that too when it comes to stupid things like lease rates and engine overhaul times and time on wing.
This is why our Friday night call that's like 2 to 3 hours could be like 15 minutes.
It totally could. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a bit about North America.
It's a big continent, but that's not important right now.
It is. Well, that's very airplane-esque. Well said. Yeah. The things going on in North America that you've been focusing on the blog from the time that your friends started Cranky Flier for you.
I started it. They just pushed me into it to do it and bought the URL. Okay,
so from the time that they started it for you, here's what's been the overall trend of the North American airlines. Oversimplify it for us here.
Consolidation. There were a lot more airlines in 2006 than there are today. Upgauging, unbundling. I don't know, that's pretty good. that's pretty good high level simplification.
Oh yeah,
you forgot in almost industry wide bankruptcy, I guess, at different
that's
points.
Just given. That's not. Come on, pick any period that's there. Any period between 1978 and today, and you will find bankruptcy
Multiple.
as a trend. Oh yeah, and we'll never lose money again. That was
that was
a part of that time period there. Then they lost so much money, like all the money.
Like
all the monies.
all the money it was lost. It was just gone. I don't know. I mean, that's like really, that's a lifetime in this industry. 18 years is insane. And by the way,
it's several lifetimes. It's several careers.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because right then was really when real consolidation kicked off, because you had just had Delta Northwest, roll into Great Recession. And that was just a huge shock to the system for all these guys. I mean, just massive shrinking. And then after that, it was kind of recovery. And I guess it really, at that point, it did stay fairly steady. I mean, consolidation continued, right? Because you had, when was United Continental, 2009 or?
9 or 10 when that was announced. And then American not that long after.
Well, Southwest AirTran, don't forget that one too.
Oh, that's right.
And then American.
Well, Frontier Republic.
Right. And Midwest Express.
And Midwest Express, that's right.
That was a huge one. But yeah, so I mean, I think you just sort of had that consolidation phase after the Great Recession. There weren't any huge shocks for a while. It was just trying to reform the industry in a place that would come out where everyone could do well and survive and all that. And I guess you had the rise of the ULCC structure, and then it was COVID.
Okay, let's talk ULCCs. Some more
Can we
current
still
events.
call them that, or are we obligated by law to call them low margin airlines now?
LMAs.
I like it.
That's
how about ultra low margin airlines?
ULMAs.
ULMAs. Yeah.
Did you see Spirit's results today?
Yeah, not great. And I've got I have a standing bet with Garrick that Spirit will not file until after the end of the year. So 2024 will not include a Spirit filing.
They said today they should be doing a lot of the refinancing work this summer, right? So we'll know by the end of the summer, I would imagine, which way it's going to go.
Yeah. So this brings the big ULCC question: is that business model forever broken?
I don't think it is. I think it is in a very bad place right now. But if there's anything we've learned about this industry, is that everything is cyclical. Southwest was a ULCC in a sense back when it started. Then it got old and its costs went up, and the model shifted because it didn't unbundle everything. And then someone else came in and said, here, we've figured it out. We'll come in with these lower fares and do our thing and whatever and unbundle everything. And that worked until it didn't. We're still in this place right now where I think you have the legacy airlines, really hammering on a lot of these leisure spots, especially like an American from the network side that is certainly much more focused on, well, certainly not on managed business travel, but they just want to be the default airline of choice based on the schedule that they put in the market and things like that. But you also have this upgauging going on, which just pours more seats into places. United is in the early phases of its next thing, United Next. It's just going to have more and more seats it puts into places. And, I think the ULCC model in the US is just so different than what you see in Europe, where in Europe, if you want to fly between any two cities that are non-hub, there's a great chance that you're flying a ULCC. In the US, it's Southwest, and then you start getting to pretty small cities pretty quickly. The ULCCs in the US really focused on Vegas's, Florida's, all that kind of stuff. And now with the legacies putting more in there, they have to rethink that model. And I also think we do need to separate them out. I mean, you've got Spirit and Frontier struggling mightily. You got Sun Country and Allegiant kind of killing it. There's not a monolithic ULCC here, but Allegiant is more similar to like a European one, right? In the sense that they're connecting places that aren't really connected otherwise. I think it's just the model has to shift. Frontier has a lot of plans that it's been putting into place. Spirit keeps saying it's going to tell us about plans. Maybe it will. Or just because some of the airlines are struggling doesn't mean that the model doesn't have a place. It may just be as they are today that it doesn't work exactly that way. And I mean, you've seen Scott Kirby at United, to kind of lay it all out there about all the issues. You have cost convergence and all this kind of stuff, which just makes it really hard to do. And yeah, you have cost convergence until guess what? Another airline comes along. Yeah. We have a huge surplus of pilots that are all furloughed, and they can come in with a cheaper thing, and then they can make it work, and it's renewed again. The real successes are the ones that find a way to make it through those early days where they're just winning on costs alone, I think.
But even so, one of the most interesting, now that we're in earnings season, one of the most interesting earnings reports for me that shows the shift in the market really has been Southwest. I mean, they're in that middle space. Ironically, the same type of space that I think JetBlue is in, just less confined for Southwest. What we kind of call the LCC, now that we have the U moniker for all the other LMAs.
Well, but they're very different. When it comes to mid-sized cities, Southwest is the king. I mean, you've got, once you get below the hubs, those are Southwest jam. I mean, they're all former hubs, right? Like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, St. Louis, City,
Nashville. Yeah.
I mean, Southwest owns these places. They will always have that backbone, even if they have to fix things and, where do we put capacity? What do we do? They have that backbone that they can lean on to. Even look at California, man. Intra-California, there's no one else even relevant unless you're going between like LAX and San Francisco. Alaska maybe a little bit, but Southwest has things they own. JetBlue does not.
Yeah.
It seems like Southwest should have more opportunity, but then, when you see them pull out of 4 of the smaller markets that they had gone into during the pandemic, you think, oh, maybe it doesn't. Maybe they don't have that opportunity. But I think Southwest probably has more that it can leverage if it wants to do that. I mean, it can move away. It can go to smaller airplanes. It needs smaller airplanes now desperately, but it could even go down into a different level if it wants to. JetBlue, I don't know, has the same kind of flexibility. They pick the absolute worst possible airplane they can use. Now they have the 220, but before with the 190s. But yeah, they've done that. They've tried to make that move. The other thing too is that JetBlue is a leisure airline and Southwest is and has always been a business airline. If you're in Texas, I mean, since they started, it's always been about business travel. Herb was the master of promotion, right? Like that was one of the many genius things they put out there. But they were trying to get those frequent business travelers who just didn't want to pay a lot of money. I mean, it wasn't about contracted travel or anything. It was about people who needed to move and needed the frequency and all that. And JetBlue is decidedly not that. So I do see them as very different. I always find it funny that they get lumped together, and I understand why. But the reason Southwest is still around is because it created this defensible fortress in its small cities and some of these really lucrative shorter haul markets that are out there. JetBlue has JFK slots, which is worth a lot, but they had Boston, which they're going to have to work to reclaim.
And I think, you definitely feel, is that the right word, Southwest moving north. Their true competition, I think, is more
Canada?
The big three. Yeah, no, not Canada. No, the real north.
New strategy.
Yeah.
North.
Not the great white one. I'm talking like the great north. Green one, the revenue north.
Oh.
Garrick, have you ever flown Southwest?
Once.
Well done. That's impressive.
So, well,
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that was not to Atlanta.
That was not. No, I'm trying to think what it was from. I mean, it was definitely either out of Islip. That's what I used to fly out of when I could. But
the airline known for open seating is now finally, I think, is the appropriate term, brought into question. Like this earnings season, the idea that you line up in groups and it's open seating and you sit where you are. I'm not saying that they haven't said that's going to change. They said they're looking into it. What did Bob Jordan say?
They've done this before. This isn't the first time. I think when you look at Southwest, you've had 2 reigns. You call it what you will. I mean, obviously there were people in between and before Herb came in, whatever. But you had Herb in the high growth mode. The product is fixed. Let's just grow this thing. Let's expand around the country. Let's do it, right? And it was a formula that worked, and he managed to shepherd them up through that point. And then you had a little turbulence when he left, but then ultimately it was Gary Kelly who stepped in, and it became his reign. And Gary's reign felt like we still need to be what made us Southwest. And I think in my mind, probably too much so. They could have spent more time modernizing systems and doing other things to provide more opportunity. And I don't think they really felt they needed it until much later in Gary's tenure. And I think they were too afraid to make changes to the model, even though the business changed and they needed to make changes. And so that's how we ended up with this, frankly, pretty crazy boarding system. I mean, the early days, you had to go to the gate exactly at 1 hour. They started handing out plastic boarding cards. Like, that was it. You couldn't do that, obviously, in the end. Eventually, they had to do online, and you could still, get your boarding card then, but you still had to get to the gate to line up and do those things. And so they, tortured themselves to create something that's still stuck to that original whatever. And I think it's made them leave a lot of money on the table.
Because remember, bags still fly free. So it's very hard to quantify how much that earns them, because there's a benefit to that.
Yeah. And they are true believers in that.
And fair enough. Yeah, I think there is real benefit. But when you're making money, it's easier to defend that than...
Well, that's true. But on the other hand, why not charge for the second bag? Like,
right, yeah.
That should be easy money that doesn't take away from your message that a check bag flies free. Like, that still seems like something that you could do to almost instantly boost your revenue. You could make the argument that the product changes are possible. Maybe they should have an extra legroom section. I mean, there are different ways you could think about it. You don't even have to do assigned seating even, right? You could just, if you buy into this product, you get pre-boarding. I mean, they have the Business Select now, but it's actually a different physical product. I mean, there are different things they could do. But I think they're at the point now that what they need to do is back up and rethink entirely, because every time they try to stay as Southwest as possible, they just overcomplicate the thing and confuse people. I mean, I'd love to see Garrick figure out how to board a plane at Southwest. Sounds like if you haven't flown them, it's kind of a...
Last I remember was somebody had told me, oh yeah, so you want to get on at 12:01 so you can try to check in to get in the early groups.
No. It's there was a point, I think, if I remember right, where it was that, but now it's 24 hours.
That's 24 hours.
24 hours before. To the second.
Okay, so you still have that time that you have to get on so you can get the earliest group.
You can buy early bird, which will auto check you in. But early bird, if everyone on the plane buys early bird, then the last person on the plane still paid for early boarding and is the last person on the plane.
Yeah. In fairness, though, I mean, that's the same with, say you have status on American, which, a case for me, I was on an early morning departure at a DFW on American for DCA, and I think I was platinum at the time, so I hadn't kind of moved my way up yet. The gate agent came on and they said, look, all the executive platinum people asking about upgrades, 3/4 of this airplane are platinum.
Oh, yeah.
You're in the back. Right, so you still get the same. I guess that's kind of an extreme example.
It's not, though. Not in the hubs. I mean, it's a very different example because people aren't paying for pre-boarding. I mean, the whole point of early bird at Southwest is I want to get on earlier so I can get a good seat. They won't tell you about early bird, about how it works behind the scenes, and I think they've done more to start restricting it. But I don't know. For the most part, I never buy it if I'm traveling alone. Then when I check in, I tend to be, if I get it right there, then I tend to be in the low Bs, somewhere like B15 or 20. It is something that probably needs to be revisited to figure out how do you do this, because there are people that don't like it, and there is probably more opportunity for them to make more ancillary money. And that's why they'll probably look at it. It's one thing when you've got Herb, who built a successful airline, and if someone else tries to come in and change it, then you're just dealing with that. But then you had another 20 years after that of Gary Kelly saying, we need to still be like Herb and not change too much and stuff like that. And then I feel like you get to this point.
In fairness to Gary Kelly, these are kind of some of the things we would always say about Southwest. I could imagine one of the biggest challenges he had was Herb was still around. right? He's
for a lot
godfather of the airline. Like, he's larger than life. He was the culture. He sets the culture. I mean, we will probably never know just how challenging it was, but how much really could be changed. That, let's say, like, that shadow now no longer exists for Bob Jordan.
But Bob Jordan has a very long history at the company. So, he may still feel that. Even though Herb isn't technically around anymore, his weirdly preserved office is still around in the headquarters building. So I think it kind of sits over you. If you haven't seen that, by the way, you should go. They preserved it on Herb's last day, and there's glass in front of it. You can look through and see his office.
Okay.
It's all.
I have a new life goal. I mean, I can just put saran wrap over this, and
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. There's so much conditioning in an airline like Southwest, I think, that, we have the warrior spirit and hero's heart and all this kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter how many new people they have coming into the company. Part of that thing they do is really instill that culture.
Yeah.
You don't see that at other places.
I mean, you would think, you mentioned before, the whole kind of upgauging and the fact that they've got too much capacity coming in, they need smaller airplanes, right? Now would be a good time to offer more leg room, right? If they've got MAX 8s that are coming in, right? It's not, but they need smaller airplanes. Why not offer more space? You get less seats. You can serve, different product if they're something that they're trying to do, or if there's something they've thought about.
I'm sure they've thought about it. What's even funny though is they could probably do an extra legroom section and not even lose any seats because they already have pretty generous legroom in the regular seating. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it that American puts 172 on its MAX 8s or 800s.
Yeah, that was a first class section.
And main cabin extra. And Southwest puts 175. They have 3 more seats.
Oh, wow, yeah.
There's a lot that they could do if they're willing to make that decision to say, we don't have to be the same for all anymore.
Right.
It's a leap for them. It would be a big change. I realize that. They got to figure out how to start making more money, or any money right now.
To be fair, Southwest is not in trouble. Right. They're doing their thing. But it is, things are a little bit different now. The kind of, the benefit of the doubt is not as strong as it was. They are starting to be asked questions that they weren't before. I mean, not to pick on Southwest, it's just the most kind of interesting thing here over the past couple of weeks. But like you said, Brad, there's plenty of changes that can be made. But then, we talk about company culture in a positive, and Southwest has one of the best company cultures in aviation. But there's an inertia that comes with that, right? And these are the type of, I remember having conversations with people who started at Southwest Airlines when, in the 70s, saying, we tried to get out from under the open seating, and we were just kind of too far in. We couldn't just flip the switch. Well, when you're profitable and growing at a consistent rate year after year, it becomes very difficult to rock the boat. At what point do they start reconsidering some of those options now that you're maybe not you're not consistently profitable? It exposes a little bit more of those questions to go back after and make some changes. Like I said, Southwest is not in any.
They're not going anywhere at all. I mean, the worst thing that could happen to them is if they screw this up so badly and stock prices tank, and then someone comes in and tries to take them over, activist investor, something. I mean,
anybody in mind? Anybody specifically?
Nope.
You saving up?
I mean, I think Icon's a little busy right now.
Yeah, he's got his hands full. And I think he's lost most of that early bump that he got out of JetBlue.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see where that goes. I mean, JetBlue is taking a lot of action right now, so we'll see where they need to start showing that it does something and that it'll work. But look, if Icon gets bored, I think there's another airline in the Metroplex that might be an interesting target at some point.
And it's not Southwest. Let's see. Legend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Legend. You're right.
Which airline do you think has the most low-hanging fruit that quick changes could go in and fix. And I'm going to limit it to North America because I don't want you saying ITA. And I'll tell you, because that's kind of an obvious.
That is a fun one. Look, I think New Pacific really missing a lot of opportunities there in the Ontario to national market. I don't know why they stopped that one.
Yeah, Lynx, Bonza, still too soon. Is this
Bonza's way too soon? That's
yeah. I'm gonna just go work at 777 Partners. Is that is that the way to go? We can do that.
I mean, airline CEO, 777 Partners.
Yeah, it seems like a good opportunity. Look, I think it's not United or Delta, right? I mean, Delta's already up there, and United's the trajectory is going in the right place. Like, they're doing all the right stuff. I'm tempted to say American, but you talk about quick fixes. I don't think there's a quick fix at American right now. I mean, the damage that they've been doing to the business, I think is going to take a while to reverse, even if they decided to reverse it. Great network in the Sun Belt, but I think there's a lot of heavy work that needs to be done there to repair that one. I mean, it may be something like a Spirit. I don't know. It's hard to say because
you think that's low hanging.
There's so many problems at Spirit because you have huge debt due and you got so many airplanes on the ground and with the GTF, like all this stuff that. I mean, are you inheriting all these problems? Like, you can't really solve them. You're right. It's not low hanging when those are some of your problems.
Yeah, the question was not which airline would you pick up out of bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, then that's not as cool.
But listen, so Spirit's interesting, top of mind, right? It's they just had their earnings, not great. They've been not great for a while. You have Ted Christie, who is running the airline, the former CFO, so very financially focused CFO. He has a giant wall of obligations due. I think it's fall of 25.
I think there's a couple. There's some 26.
I think it's 26 too. Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, there are walls beyond the wall.
The first wall was not until next.
The first big wall. And you have Spirit approaching it in kind of that very Ted Christie financial way, which is we have financial problems. We have problems with financing that's coming due. We're going to address those. The low-hanging fruit may be more on the questioning, well, why do you suddenly have the financial problems, right? The costs are not the same. The pilot contract was very rich. The network changed. We haven't even talked yet about the bottomless pit of demand and how we found the bottom to that. But Spirit's been most susceptible.
Well, Frontier too, but Frontier's been much quicker to act and make changes. I mean, if you had asked me this a month ago, I would have said JetBlue hands down, right? But now we've got a new management team in there. The mergers are all dead. Mergers/NEA, whatever, it's all dead. Now they go it alone. They got a team they can fix it. If we're talking about like current state and forgetting about who's in there to actually fix it, then I would still say JetBlue. To me, there's a ton of low-hanging fruit there. But I think the management team knows that. On the Spirit side, it is really hard to go into there at this point because you do have these financial obligations that have to drive everything that you do. It's not easy to say, all right, where do we go? And I think, even if there are network related things, the other airlines know Spirit's in trouble. They smell it, so they want to kill them. You think American necessarily would have responded the same way in these markets that Spirit went into if it wasn't?
They didn't with Frontier, at least not to the same level, right?
Well, it depends on the markets, but yeah,
fair enough. And in further fairness, Americans' response to Spirit was like Spirit adds 3 weekly. Americans like we'll add the 12th daily to San Antonio
or something. Daily to Memphis or something, or Milwaukee or whatever it is. Right. So it feels very heavy-handed. So I think Spirit is in that position of doom right now where you're teetering and you may have an idea of how to get out, but everyone's going to try and kill you because they smell it that there's a chance that they could succeed. In that sense, there's not really low-hanging anything because there are very few ways out. Otherwise, there still are ways to fix the airline, obviously, but it just makes it that much harder when you're in such a hole. I think.
Yeah, how much of Spirit's problems? This is a conversation I had with Streeter last time we were chatting. But how many of Spirit's problems are a function of their other problems? By that, what I mean is, you start getting Wall Street starts getting nervous, and the credit card companies start getting nervous, raising their covenant requirements, which puts a cash strain on the company, which then, because the credit card companies are getting nervous, you've got your lenders that are getting nervous. And so it's all just because everybody's nervous, and the passengers get nervous. They're like, well, I don't know, I'm hearing that Spirit may be having trouble, so probably shouldn't book Spirit. And you get this spiral, and suddenly Americans 14th daily to Memphis. Right, which just adds to it, blood in the water type of thing.
It's a house of cards kind of thing, that it just built something that works, but then everything starts turning against you, and then at some point you may get to that place where you pull one card, and all of a sudden the whole thing crumbles because people smell blood in the water, and they're just trying to push you over the edge.
In a Chapter 11 situation for Spirit, looking at the fleet, I know that there's been some talk of the potential for Chapter 7, and I see the reasoning behind that. But there's no way those airplanes and that chunk of capacity would leave the market that quickly. Those airplanes would go somewhere.
Yeah, someone
would remain in the United States. Those employees, which was sorely needed in this industry, would be soaked up. Yeah. The capacity would still be there. It's the bankruptcy itself, not the elimination of Spirit, that would have any kind of value there. I mean, how does this all unravel?
Well, I mean, it unravels potentially for the existing entity, right? It doesn't mean that it can't reconstitute in different ways or pieces will be absorbed by others. It doesn't unravel for the pilots or something like that. They just probably have to end up somewhere else. I don't know. It seems like the biggest issue is if they can't refinance the debt, then that's the first thing that kills them. And then if it does start getting to I don't know what their holdback is, they won't say for credit cards, but if they go to, let's say it's low and they go up to 100% holdback because they're getting more and more worried, I mean, that could break the camel's back. I think there are a lot of different things that can do that. And you talk about demand. If people start worrying that Spirit's going under, that can certainly happen too.
But in a Chapter 11 scenario, does Frankie throw in money and be like, okay, great, the whole thing that we tried to do between Frontier and Spirit, we bring those two together. Even in a Spirit, the Freudian, a couple years ahead there. Even in a Spirit bankruptcy, the fleet is still needed.
The fleet is needed, but it wouldn't necessarily be deployed in the same way. I mean, this was one of the central arguments about the JetBlue acquisition of Spirit too, is that you're going to be killing a low-cost operator. Mm-hmm. And, just absorbing the fleet into this higher cost thing. I mean, you can be sure that if these guys were to shut down all those 321 Neos, United's like, hello. And, they'll find a way, but it wouldn't necessarily be the same thing. Yes, it's easy to say that someone will pick up these airplanes and somebody will use these and someone will hire these people. But also you mentioned, does Frankie do it? Chapter 11 is probably this. Maybe hasn't been tested yet, but this is probably harder than it's ever been because you don't have that merger option under the current administration. It doesn't matter that it's Chapter 11. They probably would still find a way to shoot that down and say, well, there are other options.
Well, but if the leading option was Chapter 7, if the leading alternative was Chapter 7, there's no way, I don't know if you can allow it, or not, or disallow it, right? The exit of that much capacity for whatever administration was in the DOJ would be a disaster.
But it wouldn't be an exit. That's the thing. I mean, look at
in Chapter 7. In Chapter 7.
But no, because even in Chapter 7, people would pick up the assets and use them. The capacity would come back very quickly. Airlines are desperate for capacity right now, which is probably a mistake. But, they want those airplanes. They want that capacity. So I think if you look at the judge's ruling on the Spirit JetBlue deal and how they consider something to be a failing firm to be able to be approved, even though it, allows consolidation that would otherwise violate antitrust rules or something. I think it's a much narrower definition it's certainly a narrower definition than I assumed. But I think it does make it, potentially somewhat tougher here to push those types of things through. Now, you could have a different administration.
Well, the only two options for the next 4 years are known, right? And the DOJ has been very consistent the last 8. So, I think we could assume that it's going to be very similar for at least the next 4.5.
I don't know. If we have a new former president, if someone can bribe him with enough money or do something to find a way to push back on the DOJ or whatever it may be. Who knows what he would try to do, right? We've seen the types of things that he's willing to do in certain situations. But yeah, I do think you have to assume that they're not going to change their mind. And it was pretty, the Spirit earnings call was pretty pointed with, Ted Christie today saying that they're creating this 2-part industry, allow the big guys to merge previously and now no one else can. And you've got all these guys floundering and trying to figure out what to do. But it doesn't matter. It falls on deaf ears. So, but, maybe Spirit can just pick up American out of Chapter 7 and then they can pick up their pieces.
Look,
and expand fast.
If a tiny little airline in Phoenix, Arizona can buy U.S. Airways and then American Airlines,
yeah,
I'm calling it. Spirit's going to buy Delta.
Spirit's going to buy Delta.
Chalk it up. It's happening. When it happens, and if it never happens, then what? It was a joke. Nobody remembers.
Listen, Delta might actually like that because it would let them dust off the "Keep Delta My Delta" buttons. From the Airways days, get some extra use out of it. That'd be fun. I think the bigger opportunities are just the companies where investors, especially an activist, thinks that there's something that can be done to fix things and really gain more value out of it. And that's where I think about American. Spirit, you can't really do that because there's so much debt. The going concern is the issue. But if you're able to get the balance sheet in better shape, and then someone may come in and think I can do better. But if I were American, that's what I'd be thinking about is is someone going to come in here? Because, we're wildly underperforming, where they probably should be. They're not necessarily underperforming where they say they're going to be, but they're underperforming where they probably should be. It's up to Wall Street to decide when it's valued properly or not. But that's where I think the biggest potential change could happen at some airlines. It's not mergers. It's investors.
I think there is any opportunities for people to come in and start a new airline.
What's wrong with you?
Well, look at the news, right? You got Egg Weagle, right? That's basically looking to start up something else with what is it with E1 E2s, right? Is that the or what? I don't know.
No, I just saw today
or A220s.
The
eVTOL, but that's the other part.
Thing, yeah.
That's a whole different thing, right? But
eVTOL, I don't even want to talk about it.
No, it's supersonic eVTOLs.
Oh. Is Boom getting into that space now? There's always possibly something that's a niche, right? But it's never going to be something so big and wildly successful. Well, I like some of what Avello's done. I like New Haven, right? That was a great niche to go in and exploit and make a killing and make it work. I don't necessarily like the other stuff as much, but I really like New Haven. Breeze is onto something maybe, but the results aren't there. So they haven't proven that it actually works yet. There are things like that maybe there's an opportunity. But if you can't even get Spirit or Frontier to work, then how do you get another new entrant? New entrants always, that's what I like about New Haven is it was a defensible little fortress. You've got a place that should work. There's a lot of people around. There's a lot of money. There's demand, and you can take it over, and no one else can come in. Haha. So great. But if you're someone else and you're looking at this, what are you going to do? Where are you going to put the
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing that Courtney and I were chatting about in terms of like, where do you go? Like, what's out there that nobody's tried already? Because if they've tried it and it doesn't work, like, it's not going to work for somebody else.
I mean, that is the thing I like about Breeze, is that they took an airplane that has different capabilities and economics than what other airplanes had. And they felt others weren't fully taking advantage of what that airplane could do. And so that's what I like is, looking for new increases, improvements in technology, efficiency, seat costs, whatever it may be. And then you try and identify something. Now, again, jury is very out on Breeze, but
yeah, because then they decide to go with the A220 and pay a lot of money for new airplanes.
Well, the A220 is probably the right thing to do, even though it's expensive as hell.
Well, I thought that 195 was a kind of a smart move, right? Because it was a cheap airplane with lots of seats.
But it's not. That airplane's not great for a lot, though. Ask JetBlue how they feel about the E90.
Well, the 190.
Yeah, but they bought them new. That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
So they wrote those down the depreciation curve.
But they just don't. They can't go very far economically, is what I'm told.
Yeah,
I keep hearing that from that one guy at JetBlue, and I get that. But the only thing I can think of that would drive that is engines, right? Is there an hourly component over a cycle component on those 34-10s? I'm not entirely certain, or the kind of route and network accounting system specific to that. Maybe hitting those airplanes harder.
That's possible. I assumed that it had to do something with cruise fuel burn.
I would imagine the cruise, that works too.
Because that's the issue. Like the short hauls, you take off and landing, you're burning a ton taking off and less landing. But then what you do at cruise makes a big difference when you get into longer flight distance. So I figure that must be part of it. But this is way outside of what I know. The big problem with the expensive airplanes, you just got to fly them a ton, right? That's always the issue. So, maybe the right answer is let's start an airline in 10 years when the first 220s start going secondhand. So
I get this question a lot from various potential clients who want to start up an airline that actually have no money so they don't become actual clients. I think the question is always, hey, what markets can we hit with a new airplane?
Yeah.
And that's the market opening that we're going to find that's going to launch a new airplane because this city was overlooked, kind of the way that it had been in the past. Or let's do SLBs and fund the airline that way. Like, great, as long as somebody's willing to pay. So far, they have. But I think back to airlines that truly disrupted, truly found a new model, and I think of Allegiant, right? Just how unique that model was. And they've grown, not out of it, but they've evolved, right? But the idea of what the MD-80 offered that airline, the ability to trade ownership for variable costs, right? To really look at the airlines differently. And now consider through the changes that the industry's gone through and how airlines make money is different now, right? It's not even you pay me, I take you somewhere. It's you get my credit card, you use this credit card to buy all the things. I get a cutback on that. Oh, and by the way, and then you pay me a little bit when we go fly somewhere, and I break even on that to make money on the credit cards, right?
Yep.
And that's benefiting the big airlines.
It's like the ultimate subscription model. But it's true. I mean, it is. And that's Spirit was saying that as well on here. Spirit was saying the other airlines have different models and they can keep fares lower and they can put that pressure on us because we don't have the same credit card funds coming in, not at the same rate and the same kind of stuff. And so, when you become so big and important and you can get all these people signing up for your credit card, it changes your economics and what you are willing to do.
I mean, you're cashing checks in the billions from these credit card companies, right? I mean, it becomes the business model itself. And I would imagine, I'm sure these numbers exist somewhere, but for the big banks, the airlines have to be towards the top or at the top of kind of their revenue generators.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yes, they're hugely attractive to consumers and the banks love them. And there's enough money to go around. This is why I watch all this the potential credit card legislation stuff, it would be insane. Maybe in a good way. I don't know. I just think it'd be fun. But to see them blow this thing up by forcing reduced interchange fees or whatever it might be. Because right now you are effectively funding airlines every time you buy something. Because the points turn into dollars for the airlines. You know, the interchange fees are pretty hefty. Like, they can be higher than they should be. That would be such a monumental change. Whew. That probably will never happen, but it would be fascinating.
It'll never happen because of that. I think that's hard to put back in the
too many big parties involved.
Yeah.
It serves too many people at the top.
Here's the question. How many podcasts do you have now?
142.
Nice.
You're running.
Most of them I don't publish, though.
Because you just published the Cranky Talk, right?
Of Cranky Talk, which is infrequent. That one started during the pandemic. We still do it. We put it out there. We just put one out talking about DOT regulations. Cranky Talk is more consumer focused. I mean, it can go either way, but it's meant to be accessible for consumers. But that one is relatively infrequent. It's whenever there's something we think is worth talking about. The DOT regulations being the latest one that we did. And then there is the Air Show, which is our new podcast that I'm doing with John Ostrower at the Air Current, and then with Brian Summers from Airline Observer. So that one is strictly an industry podcast. That one is for the trade. We can use airport codes and things like that. Just assume people will know them. We did last week's was on American. It's a weekly episode, so we're doing generally one topic a week. Try to keep it to half an hour, so it doesn't drone on like this one. My God. And and the three of us just talking through those types of things. And last week was American, and I don't remember what we decided this week is yet, but I will figure that out in the next 2 days before we record. So that's come find us at the airshowpodcast.com or anywhere you get podcasts. But that's the one that we're really trying to make a go of these days.
So, and then I'll ask one more question before we let you go.
God.
I know, one more, which hopefully will help you. But
the answer is yes. You should go to CrankyNetworkWeekly.com and subscribe today.
Yes, you should.
On top of that, absolutely.
Every Friday night.
But I was actually going to try to make a point on Cranky Concierge, right? You know, when I think about kind of booking travel and doing everything these days, right? How do you guys differentiate what you do so that you get the customers that come in versus me going online and just, you know, clicking away and booking everything that I need? Like, how have you changed that over the years to keep it going?
You know, it's funny, the basic goal or mission or whatever you want to say on it, it hasn't really changed. I mean, how we've had to go about doing that has changed. But we make it that you're always dealing with a person, and a person who is completely fluent in English and is almost always located in the U.S. and, you know, just makes it easy and accessible and all that kind of thing. And we make sure that people on our team have the resources to be able to do more than someone else. Now, if you're flying from LA to Vegas, there's only so much you can do, right? We handle everything from the initial booking and helping people understand what their best options are, because it isn't just price and schedule, and you can't put everything into a filter on Google Flights. Mm-hmm. And, you know, things like where you connect, you know, just things we know about the different airlines at different places and what would be best for certain parties. And it's very much just an individual discussion, getting to know people. And then we monitor, we help when there are schedule changes. We do all that, give options, we deal with it. We help when things go wrong during travel. We have an internal system we've built that helps us to track and monitor all these flights and get us information. And then if there is, often we'll hear it before the passenger will, or before the airline has pushed it publicly. And then that allows us to go in and take care of them right away. So that's always been the way that we've operated. And, you know, over time, it has changed because the technology is different. The way that you book things are different. The airlines have really pushed a lot of new technology that makes it harder for us to do the kind of things that we do. And we're just really forced to adapt to whatever it needs to be. But from a customer perspective, I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
I want you to help me because I know you know what you're doing, and then I don't have to worry about it and I don't have to think about that. And then that's just on the air side. And then, we also do hotels and land and cruise,
right.
whatever it is. And we have a lot of relationships, get people extra benefits, sometimes discounts, but more often it's, just you get breakfast included or upgrades or whatever
right.
it may be, and things we can do like that in addition. So, I've always described the air side as that it's almost insurance-like. It's peace of mind.
Yeah.
You get a lot more benefit if something goes horribly wrong on your flight and you need help. But either way, you get that peace of mind. And for some people, that's absolutely worth their weight in gold.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
right. Because
that's how we've grown the business. And
that's awesome.
Growing.
Yeah. No, that's great. So look, this has been a lot of fun. It's nice to.
You don't have to lie, Garrick.
All right. It's been horrible. I mean, all you talk about is airlines. Oh, my God. We didn't talk about cars once. Not once.
God.
Come on.
Talk about high-speed rail? We got some hot high-speed rail coming to California.
I'm surprised you didn't mention that when you mentioned LA Vegas, but I was going to let it slide.
That's not LA.
That's, it's like
Vegas.
It's always nice to see you, and it's nice to get to know the other person that Courtney talks to more than I think he talks to me. So
come back to the you Kelly.
She's the other person in my life.
Are you can come back to the awards next year?
I will definitely try to make it. Absolutely.
I will definitely
try to make.
This is ridiculous.
Well, where's it going to be next year?
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Phoenix. Oh, you're back in Phoenix. All right. I'll go to Phoenix in
February. That's 27th.
27th. As long as it doesn't interfere with my kids' winter break.
Well, I have sir, that the very next week is ISTAT in Phoenix.
Oh, that's right.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. We're going to be in.
You're going to just come and hang, spend the weekend watching spring training.
Well, thank you, sir. It's definitely been enjoyable.
It's been real.
Absolutely. So keep doing what you're doing. Make sure you keep Courtney in line as well.
But you're probably going to cut all this anyway. So
you way overestimate my editing abilities.
It's more about how long does it take me to answer one question.
You're going for the record.
Yeah.
Which you still have ways to go for the record, by the way.
All right, strap in, boys. Here we go.
Once I've kind of dried my tears and come to grips with
the fact that you're not going to talk to me for a whole weekend. Is that what you were going with?
Yeah. Those are different kind of tears.
Or you need to follow my path, which is get the whiskey.
Yeah, you're right. I should.
But excuse me.
It's 2:30 in the afternoon. It's getting late for you.
It's that mid-afternoon lull, man.
Go get a reservation at Golden Corral and call it a night.
Giddy up. I